Let's speak with Peter Wilding, Senior Political Advisor, Chairman of British Influence and creator of the word Brexit. As I always like to mention every time we speak, Peter, good afternoon to you. Bet you wish you'd copyrighted that now, don't you?
You can't copyright a word, Ian.
I know you can't, but it would have been worth... I bet you Googled it to check. Listen, you are you were not a man that was delighted that we left the EU, but, you know, we did, and that's where we're at. Keir Starmer would have shared many of your concerns at the time. Do you think in Mr Starmer's heart, whatever he says today, ultimately he'd like to sneak us back in if he can?
I think in his heart, yes. But I think he's the ultimate politician and now statesman, and he has to recognise the limitations with his greater grand strategy, which is obviously to perform well over the next 5 years and get re-elected. Exploding a Brexit bomb at this stage of his first year, 2 years, 3 years, when he's got bigger fish to fry, would be political madness. So I can understand it. What he's doing is a third way, to use an old Blairite fashion. He's not either retaining the burn down all the bridges Tory European policy that preceded it, but nor is he going for the obvious solutions to feed his grand strategy, which is economic growth and security, which is to rejoin the single market and the customs union. And you can understand that third way. The problem is that it sounds great, it's poetry, but the prose of putting into effect what he's actually going to achieve from this is now very debatable. We'll no doubt go on to talk about the German summit today. It's all great. The mood music is great. The Blenheim Palace European Political Community Summit, the week after he came into power, we're going to reset relations with Europe. But how, Ian?
Because that can't be done, can it, with just speaking to any one particular leader? I mean, you might have a couple of sort of very loose, vague treaty arrangements with another country, but all the big stuff, that requires a rubber stamp from the EU itself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. On the key matters of economic growth, trade is the competence of the European Union, and all the rest is conversation. Now, things could be achieved, Ian, don't get me wrong. I mean, the French and the Germans themselves, outside the confines of the European Union, had a treaty in 2019, which was there to get closer cooperation, cross-border, and all manner of things. That's great news. And we can do the same. Two problems. One, you're absolutely spot on. The things that really matter to Keir Starmer to go for growth are going to be impeded if people's got to fill in forms at the border, passport checks, rock musicians not being able to tour because of all the musical problems, and it's all madness. It needs to be sorted out. Olaf Scholz can't do that. Totally on trade, he can do that in separate issues. But this is the second point I want to see in, is where is the grand strategy? What's the 5-year plan?
Yeah.
Where does Keir want to get himself? And so that needs the second problem, Brussels. Obviously, the big solution is we need to liberalise trade again. But we are, the Brussels institutions are suspicious of a British mentality of cherry picking. And we have to really be very careful diplomatically on saying, oh, we're going to have these bilaterals. Keir goes to Paris tomorrow. Let's have a conversation about immigration. Let's come. But, the two things they've rejected already, the simple things, Ian, to get this show on the road, namely the offer from everybody, including the European Union, let's allow kids to travel unimpeded in Europe under the age of 30. Let's re-establish the Erasmus scheme so kids can move and get educated. Let's do that. And Keir said no. So I don't know what the grey market is here.
Yeah, I mean, Kirsty Allsop's son managed to do it, but that's a whole other story. But do you think Keir is just scared that he's going to, put the frighteners on people who will think, if he does that, what's his next move going to be?
Definitely, Ian. But there are two things about this. One, FDR, 100 days, your first 3 months in power, you are at your most powerful. You can set the agenda. You can say, I am the leader, this is where we're going to go, it's a different direction from the previous guys, follow me. But Keir's not decided to do that. He's decided to wring his hands, things are really terrible, it's going to take time. And that's a mood music, which they've agreed on, which they think will create an atmosphere of trust, etc. But the problem is the big idea. And I think the problem with Keir is that he will find himself Unlike the Tories, who had their members, the media, and their members of parliament begging them to be hostile to Europe, he's got 100 to 150 Labour MPs who have got exactly the opposite mindset. And they'll start coming in the next year, year and a half, when they're not promoted, things are going wrong, jobs are being lost. Oh, if only those border controls were relaxed and we could trade better. And these guys are going to come up and say, what are you doing here? And that is going to where the rubber hits the road with regard to this policy that we're seeing now today.
Do you think now, though, Pete, I mean, it's largely a sort of a separate question, but it dovetails in naturally to, obviously, Starmer's visit. Do you, after all the years of bickering and arguments and what happened with Parliament and the courts and all that we went through, 8 years worth, and here we are today, do you now, would you concede as a Remainer, Peter, that actually this whole EU relationship thing can work just fine? It's not a law of physics. We've got exciting times ahead.
I'd love to believe it. I mean, that's the, don't talk down Britain argument that the Tories so successfully deployed, not as a divisive strategy. No, look, the truth is we've got to get real. I mean, you've got to say to Keir Starmer, he's getting real. He's squaring up with the British public on matters economic. But the one absolute elephant in the room is we're losing £40 billion worth of tax revenue each year to the British Treasury because we're outside the single market. That's the 4% reduction in growth per year that the OBR and other think tanks said. It's 40 billion. It's almost the size of the defense budget here. Is not there anymore because we're not in the single market, okay? So you've got to confront those things. So the debate doesn't go away as long as obvious elephants in the room are striding around. And the single market is one of them. The other, of course, is the trade deals, less so important. Rory Stewart thinks getting the customs unions the next thing. It's rubbish. Getting into the single market is the issue. And I'll tell you something funny here. We're getting into a situation right now where we're talking about, oh, we can't possibly go into the single market and customs union. That wasn't even on the ballot paper in 2016. That was soft Brexit. We chose hard Brexit. Now, nobody's saying, hang on, hard Brexit was bonkers. Let's talk about soft Brexit. They don't want to touch it with a barge pole. But there are truisms in politics, Ian, and I think it will come home to roost. It's not an action of policy, but you're damn right, he's frightened still of the mainstream media. He's frightened of renovating the dead corpse of the Tory party, which of course would be the grist to their mill. Starmer, going back to the single market, that will unify him. He wants to avoid that.
Well, we are going to watch with interest over the next couple of years because there's a lot of eyes on Starmer on this particular subject. Listen, Peter, thank you for your analysis. Always good to get your take. Peter Wilding, Senior Political Advisor, Chairman of British Influence and creator of the word Brexit. That was his word, Brexit. First came up with it, couldn't copyright it. But he's doing all right, Peter, don't worry. He's not starving.